Welcome to Josh and Austin Figure It Out. It's great to see you. Well, I can't see you. You're seeing me and Austin, and we have a third person here, our very first guest.
Yes.
Welcome. Hello, Eric Bailey.
Hello, hello. It's great to be here. I'm very excited.
The
Welcome to the show, Eric. Apologies to all the loyal fan base that we've been on a bit of a hiatus now. We haven't recorded in a little over a month, so bear with us as we get back in the swing of things. But we decided to come back with a bang, our first guest. So this week it's Josh and Austin and Eric. Figure it out. So we're gonna chat. We're gonna learn a little bit more about Eric and his work at Bluesky and just have an all around good time. So thanks for joining us again after a short hiatus. I hope you haven't forgotten about us.
yeah, it's we I had a baby. I didn't have a baby. My wife had a baby, and so I was on pat leave
You were
and
there.
doing all the. I was there. I was around. And doing all the things and uh, as one does with a baby, and so didn't really have a chance to podcast. Now I'm back at work as of last week, so I'm pumped. Austin, do you have any personal updates,
Not really.
life changes?
Still cold. Still live in an old house. Just really quickly for Eric's sake, I am I'm Austin. I do React Native at Principal Financial Group in downtown Des Moines. Very large financial services organization. So that's me in 30 seconds. And Eric, you might be familiar with Principal because from what I understand, you have some ties to Iowa. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah, yeah. Born and raised. Went to school at University of Iowa. Love to get over to Des Moines when I get a chance. Got some friends out
Yeah.
west Des Moines. I often stay with. They run a hot sauce company actually. Shout out to Iowa Pepper Co. I don't know if you've ever seen that. You go to like the,
Very
I
cool.
think
Oh,
they're the Valley Junction farmers market every week in
I've
Yeah.
been
summer.
there.
So they do a hot pepper eating contest. If you've heard of that one. But anyway, yeah, yeah. Love Des Moines. I was actually born in Des Moines, so you know, great to be on the call with a couple, fellow Des Moinians.
Yeah.
That's I'm in
Des
there. Yeah.
Moinesans. Yeah.
There you
Central
go.
Iowans. You got it.
Yeah. Right on.
And Eric, you don't live in Iowa anymore. You live in New York or Chicago?
So my wife and I were in New York for about 5 years, and then we've been in Chicago now for a little over 5 years. And who knows what we'll be in the next 5 years, but we like cities. Eventually we may downsize a little bit, but yeah, Chicago's a great spot. Love it here.
And so I've followed you for a long time on the internet, on Twitter and now Blue Sky, and I can't remember the origin of that. Was it? Did you work at an Iowa-based tech company?
Yeah, potentially. I can't recall either. I know I've seen you on the internet for quite some time as well. I definitely kind of latch on anytime I see someone that's like a programmer from
Hmm.
Iowa specifically. I'm like instant follow, instant follow.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad to be introduced to Austin now too. Um, there's a lot of us, but there's also not a lot of us. And Texas,
Not a
small
lot
world.
of us,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't recall exactly, but I did work at a marketing agency like coming out of college, like my senior year of college and the year after, called Sculpt. I was based in Iowa City.
Yes,
And so
that was it.
maybe around that time.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, you think so? Yeah. Yep.
yeah. Was
That
there
was a
another Josh who ran that company?
yes. Yes, there
Yeah,
was. Okay, that must be it.
yep,
Yeah, Josh Krakauer. Yeah, good friend. He's
yep.
actually still running. It's a yeah, definitely
Oh,
a successful
nice,
business. It's expanded
awesome.
beyond Iowa City. They've got
Hmm.
people all over the world, all over the U.S. now too. So, um, but yeah,
Hmm.
that was a fun it was a fun time back then doing like marketing. I was doing photography, uh, Twitter ads, Facebook ads. I was running the Facebook for like the Iowa entrepreneurship program, stuff like that. So yeah, I was very active on Twitter and always like, trying to, kind of network and associate with, especially developers, because I was getting interested in development around that time. So that must be it. That's so funny. I'm glad you remembered that. That's a deep cut.
Yeah, I thought there was. Yeah, I thought there was a deep cut connection there,
Right on.
and it's been interesting following you since then. What after Sculpt? What did you do? Tell us about your kind of your career path.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny thing, probably very similar to a lot of folks though. I don't have a background in like computer science. I went to Iowa for originally medical stuff, which was just a total mistake on my part.
Hmm.
Freshman year was pretty rough. Um, and then I came back and I switched majors and I switched to business, I think actually for a minute. And that's kind of how I got introduced to entrepreneurship kind of side of things. But that pretty soon I decided I didn't like that kind of thing, so I switched to art. So I graduated with a certificate in graphic design from University of Iowa, BFA. But yeah, I worked with Josh coming out of the Dell Center. Shout out to JPEC, John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center at Iowa. Started to get interested in that kind of stuff, and I was doing mostly design at the time, but I started doing some website design, and then started helping out with CSS and things like that here. So this is where it becomes like a very familiar thing for a lot of folks that have like a non-traditional background. They started doing HTML, CSS, maybe WordPress or something like that. And it just like really like piqued my interest, and I became really interested in that side of things. Um, and so I started to kind of get interested in open source as well. And I started following, I don't know if you guys know like Brent Jackson, Adam Morse, like Jackson Black and Murmurs. They wrote like base CSS and tachyons and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
heard of that.
Nicole Sullivan and stuff like all like,
Yeah.
there's like a whole bunch of
Mhm.
like little CSS frameworks and things spreading up. So I kind of got really inspired by that. And I started like, I think I pushed my first package to NPM in like 2014, somewhere around there. And that was like when I like kind of realized like, okay, I think maybe development is the way to go. And so I started kind of looking for development jobs. And my now wife had actually interned in New York. And so I kind of started looking at things in New York to see like, oh, what's out there. And there was this really cool agency that I'd followed for a while called Barrel. Um, and they were actually hiring a junior designer, like an entry level design position. I was like, sweet, I'll apply to that. And so I was like working on that application, and it got filled. Uh, and so then they had a junior developer position also open, and I was like, what the hell? Like, I'll give that a shot, So I applied to that, and so they hired me as a junior developer, and so that kind of just solidified it. Um, and so I moved out to New York in 2015, January 2015, and then just started doing code from there on out. Basically, I haven't really looked back. I do very little design. I do still get to do some design, even at Bluesky, just because we don't have a full time product designer right now. So still get to flex that a little
Oh,
bit, but
nice.
that was kind of the transition happened 10 years ago, and it's still kind of like, I dip back in, but
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I didn't realize you had also worked at Barrel, because Barrel is like also one of the agencies that I had followed when I was at an ad agency in Des
oh
Moines.
yeah.
I was like, oh, this is such a cool company, and I would always check their website and like watch
Mhm.
what they're doing. They had a lot of, I think they had some open source stuff, but also just good blogs
They
and
did.
visual design and stuff. And so I didn't know you worked there. So that's cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was honestly a great company. I can't speak highly enough of them and like the leadership team there. Um, Seriously, it was a great experience. It's like, best possible agency to land at, honestly. So I got really lucky there.
Cool. And in New York City too, like you're in the big time ad world. I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
exciting stuff.
I mean, they certainly weren't like big time ad world back then, but in terms of just like, just it's like the right mix. They had like good level
Right.
of stuff, but I wasn't working on Pepsi or anything like, crazy where I'm just a cog in the machine. It was very like a small kind of family feeling kind of thing.
Yeah, more tight knit.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Eric, connect the dots for me from self-taught designer, agency developer to React Native at one of the fastest growing React Native apps in the world right
Yeah.
now. That's pretty cool. Connect those dots for me.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. It's also just sort of a series of funny stories that kind of add up eventually. Um, yeah, I worked at Barrel, and after Barrel, I worked at another agency called The Couch, in New York City. It's just a 5-person agency. I was kind of the fifth wheel there with 4 partners. Um, while I was at Barrel, I started going to a meetup. I met a guy that worked a few floors below me, Ryan DeWidgeon, great guy, still friends to this day. And the first night I went to that meetup, I met another very good friend of mine, Nick Beatty. And over the years, we collaborated on a few things here and there. But leaving the agency world, I got a chance to work with Nick at a company called TrueWork. And so he had already worked there and was able to give me a recommendation to get my foot in the door in a product company. TrueWork is a startup out of San Francisco. And so that was my first like product role. And I worked there from about 2019 to 2022. So kind of during the pandemic, that kind of era. And then Nick had moved on to another company. This is going to involve Nick a lot, probably, or really this story. He moved on to another company called Rainbow, which is a crypto wallet. And
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily very interested in crypto overall. But at the time, it was like kind of an interesting thing, and that was in React Native, and I was very interested in getting into React Native, or really just getting closer to native development, as well as like some opportunities to do some like back end development things there. So it felt like a good move to kind of like shift closer and closer that direction. And so I worked for him at Rainbow from 2022 to 2023, just over a year, not terribly long. And that was when Bluesky was just starting to kind of open up. They had launched their app in, I think, was it, February of 2023. I should know these things. I should know our timeline better than that, honestly. But I think it
What
was
is
somewhere around
time?
there.
That's
It
fine.
hadn't been open for too long. I had been looking for an invite code for some time, and I'd finally gotten one. I think I joined in May or something like that. And then I saw that they were hiring, and so I just sent in an application, had the interview process, went through all that, met all the team, um, and it worked out from there basically. So it's one of those weird things, like it's like someone you meet 10 years prior, can give you like maybe a foot in the door, gets you learning like the tech that you need in order for like when that opportunity comes along for like the right company. It's just like, oh, I have those skills, and it's the right time for them, and it's the right time for me, and so yeah, I just in most of my stories, I'm just going to say that I'm very fortunate and lucky to have known people, at the right times, and also people who have like helped me along the way and taught me things and helps me, grow. So
That's awesome. So you're joining Blue Sky and you're working on React Native stuff. Is it a combination? Okay, this is gonna both of you can help me learn what React Native is, but is it a true write once use everywhere type of thing? Is when it comes to like styles and components, or are you um, very specifically building like the mobile experience and then now there's a web experience and I have to kind of like make some changes?
it's a good question, and maybe Austin has a different answer. I would say that is the promise of React Native. And I think different companies approach it different ways. It's often the case that one company will start with one platform and then expand into other platforms later. And so they become either an afterthought or, um, well, yeah, I mean, sometimes just an afterthought, basically. More or less, that is the case. I think that it is write once, run everywhere. And then I'll also say that you get to a certain point, there are things that you just can't do with React Native. And I think that's becoming less and less the case. And so sometimes you have to jump down into the native code, which, thankfully we have, there's lots of resources online, and there's even things like LLMs that help me write, Kotlin code and stuff like that when I need to, which is very rare. But otherwise it's, it's a great experience, and the ecosystem's becoming more and more, uh, stable and mature as well. So it's becoming more and more true, the promises that they've had for a long time. I don't know if Austin has any color to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that's very accurate. Definitely for like the promise of write once run on iOS and Android is, I find that um, the cases where you have to do specific stuff for iOS and Android are usually pretty minor and pretty small edge cases. The stuff when you bring in um, write once run on the web too, that's an entirely different ball game. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but Blue Sky just does just that. They have a code base for all three platforms.
That's
Um,
correct.
which I haven't had any experience with doing React Native for the web, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what that's like at Blue Sky, having the web app and React Native as well.
Yeah, it's really been mostly painless. And maybe I say that as a web developer primarily. I still consider myself a web developer. Most of the time that's where I feel like the most comfortable. So the edge cases and things like that you have to handle are edge cases that I'm somewhat familiar with,
Mm-hmm.
thankfully. And so a lot of the code in this case is sort of targeted at native for the most part. I think that's how we write almost all of our components. They are native first, and then if we need to fork those at like the file level, I don't know if you're familiar with the file conventions you can use for .native or .web, things like that, to fork the code. We fork it towards web, and then that's like the special case kind of thing. So it's not too much of an issue. There's only issues around creating kind of consistent API contracts with components and utils and things like that need to differ based on the platform they're running on. You might have different libraries or backing implementations for each platform. a good example of that is actually like our bottom sheet menus. Like if you look at like the post drop down menu on web versus on native. On native, that's like a bottom sheet. It slides up in the bottom and shows it kind of like large full width buttons. But on web, we're using Radix, like the drop down library. And so some of the things we want to do on native aren't necessarily possible on web or vice versa. And so that contract between those components is actually quite simple. And we've done a little bit of work to like improve that and to create like more complex menus for native or more complex menus for web. And haven't actually shipped anything there because gets a little hairy, to try to like handle all the cases. Um, and so that's a good example, I think, of like the differences you have to handle. Um, there are also other libraries out there that have already handled some of this stuff for us, but sometimes you have to really pick and choose, trade-offs. A lot of libraries right now for React Native don't handle the new React Native architecture. And so some of these libraries that we've previously relied on actually don't work anymore, or they haven't been updated yet, or maybe they're abandoned. React Native's kind of notorious for having it's sort of a choose your own adventure sometimes with libraries, and JavaScript's always been like that. React Native maybe even more so, or maybe it's just in the earlier stages, that we saw with JavaScript 8 years ago, that kind of thing. Like I said, it's becoming more stable. A lot of these things are becoming much more easy, and thankfully at Bluesky we have like a really talented team where everyone is very comfortable on all platforms and has a lot of deep GitHub stars of like all these different libraries and implementations to pull from. So we muddle through, and there's definitely paths forward for all of it. Just gotta kind of sit down and really buckle down and figure out the best patterns for us.
Very fascinating. I would love to learn more about like the world of React Native. Is there like a 1,000-foot view of if I'm getting started with React Native? Is it kind of mandatory that I use something like Expo, or I know there's others in there, or can I just take the raw React Native and kind of build it and compile it and run it in my iOS simulator? What's a recommended thing for like a new project?
I mean, you certainly can. You can definitely use React Native natively. My previous company, we used React Native natively. I think that app was also started a little bit before Expo was really kind of dominant on the scene. I think nowadays, it's kind of like making like a server-side rendered React application. If you want to use server components, like you should probably just use Next.js, instead of trying
Yeah.
to create your own framework. Or I mean, there are other frameworks out there, but something like Next.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think Expo is just sort of it's become the de facto default, and there's really like not many reasons why you wouldn't want to just use their suite of libraries and all their documentation, because it's all very, very advanced and quite good. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's my take anyway.
Yeah. Austin, do you have a different take?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Just if you're starting today, just start with Expo, make it easy on yourself. Like my Principal Aura app is, they call it Bare React Native. Bare, it's barren. It's not Expo, it's Bare React Native. But we have plans to migrate to Expo as soon as possible, just because Expo does so much to soften the sharp edges and paper over platform differences and make tooling actually reasonable for developers to use, and it feels a lot closer to a lot of the web tools that we're used to. Like I feel like as JavaScript developers, a lot of us are very spoiled by the developer experience and the
Definitely.
tooling that's available to us. So then like diving into the native world, like cracking open Android Studio or Xcode or whatever, and like people actually live like this every day. Like this is the reality for a lot of people. But Expo does a great job of making all of that seem really familiar to a JavaScript developer. And yeah, I wouldn't see a reason to not pick it, especially if you're a beginner and you're wanting to learn. It does a great job.
Well said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, cool. That's awesome. What? Tell me more, I guess, about Bluesky. Not that you have to be a company pitch person or something, but like it has been so fun to watch that just explode in the last few months. It feels like. I'm sure it's felt like more than that to you, and you've seen the growth internally a lot more. But I think it's just kind of hit the mainstream a lot more. What's it like? Working on something that's clearly so captivating and hot right now. And
Yeah.
is it open source too. Am I correct? Like the
Mm-hmm.
app itself? Yeah, that's got to be like a
Yep.
whole other dimension too. So everyone can see what you're doing, and like I'm curious what your take is on all of that.
Yeah, no, it really has been kind of a wild ride. We removed the invite code requirement on February 6th of last year, so just over a year ago. So that was when we technically launched publicly. A lot of us kind of joke, that really we launched in, what was it, like November of this year,
Hmm.
when we kind of like tripled in size, or actually more than tripled in size since then. Uh, and so yeah, there's been different stages and different periods of what are like the stages of grief almost, but like,
Yeah,
and not in that
yeah,
sense. It's like, yeah, it's like the inverse. I mean, there's certainly some like, some denial or maybe some, frustration here and there, but otherwise it's like, oh, this is going well. And then we look back 6 months later and we're like, oh, that actually we weren't even doing that well then. Now we're doing well, or, we were doing better then, what happened? Like, what's going on to our numbers here? It's down this week versus last week. So things change really rapidly. Um, and I think like one of the most interesting things about the rapid change is just trying to deal with that like mentally. It becomes like a really tough challenge to kind of just like come to work every day and be like, just purely like excited because like something you've worked on for the last month, we might have to like shift gears and like not work on it
yeah,
for now, and maybe we'll pick it up in 6 months, maybe we won't. Or maybe people are on the network are very happy with us one day, and then the other day, other days something happens, and it becomes kind of a difficult time, because people are rightfully criticizing us oftentimes. So those are opportunities like to learn and to address like those shortcomings and work on features and things like that help make the app a better place for users. Um, but it is definitely an interesting experience to be working for a company that is, it's not just purely dictated by the people inside the company. It's really like a sum of everyone that's on the network too. That's really like what Bluesky is like everybody on the network, and we're just sort of the shepherds of the app, more or less. But so yeah, it has been very interesting. Kind of another part of that is the open source aspect of it. That was one of the things that really attracted me towards Bluesky. Um, the level of technical expertise on the Bluesky team is really really high, and some of the ideas that we're shipping as like open source libraries are just things that haven't been done like to this scale, and so that's like really exciting and interesting, and also difficult to keep up with as well at this point. Things move fast, and our team is growing, and so um, where it used to be just a few code bases, now it's like a handful of code bases. That's like a little bit hard to. It's not like I can look at every single PR, to kind of keep an eye on
yeah,
things. Not that they need me to keep an eye on everything, but I like to from like a just an understanding standpoint. I like to like generally understand all of the moving pieces. Um, and yeah, people do, they do see things when we push stuff up. We've pushed up UI before that, people have had questions on or concerns about. Um, we'll often push something up and someone will actually notice, like a typo or like a translation issue or something like that. Sometimes even find bugs, so um, I would say on the whole, it's been like a very positive experience to have it open, just because it really does become like it's a group effort. Thankfully we have users and developers in the ecosystem that care a lot about Bluesky, which is also a new experience for me.
hmm,
But it means that it's like this like kind of collaborative project where it's not just us building things. It's like everybody that's contributed to the GitHub is building stuff, and it feels really good the vast majority of the time. Truly, yeah,
yeah,
it's very exciting.
Yeah, so like staying on the open source stuff for a second, like how open to contributions is the Blue Sky GitHub org? Like I know some products are, you can view the source, but we don't really want to have your pull
Hmm.
requests changing from tabs to spaces or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
do you actively, are Blue Sky folks actively, going out and reviewing PRs from the community, or is it more of a, you can open something, but we might not look at it type of thing?
Yeah, no, I mean it's actually quite open. I mean, if it's anything from like moving from tabs to spaces, that's not something where that unfortunately I think we'll just say thanks, but and
Yeah.
just close that one. But no, we do review community PRs probably less than we should. I think there's a lot of good ideas out there, but just in terms of like time capacity, it's pretty difficult sometimes to ramp up on someone's idea, or to test it across platforms and things like that. But there are a lot of contributors, that have contributed multiple times. It becomes a little bit easier too if you see the same usernames in there, contributing things. That they have like a pretty good idea of what's going on and they have a lot of context on a problem, and it makes those PRs easier to review. But in general, no, we're very open. I mean, people open issues all the time. Again, issues we don't look at that often, but we're generally looking at those pages to see what's coming in, and if there's anything in there that's like really critical or something that aligns with like the priorities that we're working on at the time, then we'll usually take those and integrate them into like our internal issue tracking, and then track those like ourselves and come back later and close those things out as we finish those things. I think the client app is like the most contributed to code base. I know like the backend code bases, they're open as well, except for some like lower level stuff that's really just specific to our implementation. But anything that's like app proto related is open source, and I think those see less contributions, probably because it's a little more opaque. Sometimes that kind of stuff doesn't make sense unless you have like a client to be using it with. And so that's a little bit difficult to get ramped up on. I know there's some people that are, definitely ramped up on it and they do contribute, and we appreciate those as well. But yeah, when we're talking about open source, I think predominantly we're talking about like issues and PRs to the client app, which we're more than happy to see. And really it energizes us too.
Yeah, that's really cool. So Josh, after you go through the Expo tutorial, pull down the Bluesky app and start contributing, start throwing something in there.
You're going to see a lot of PRs coming from me. Misguided and no. Cool. Well, I just think it's so cool that you work at Bluesky, especially during this stretch of time too, because it's seen such incredible growth. And it's like, my personal experience from using it was, I think I signed up for an invite code. I waited a while. I got one. I signed in, and like, well, not many of my friends are here. And then I maybe checked it a couple times, and then I forgot about it. And then I came back when it was open and everyone was there. And it's like, oh, this feels like, early days of Twitter where, it's very honed in on the group of people I'm very interested from hearing from, and love the stuff they're talking about. And so it's a fun place to be right now. And it must be incredibly rewarding to be able to like contribute to that on a daily basis. So that's really neat.
Before we move on from Bluesky chat, Eric, I wanted to ask specifically, like, so there's that period of time when like users, it was like 1 million new users per day or something crazy. Like the growth just exploded. Like, tell me about that time specifically. Like, hopefully you weren't on call for anything during that time, but like, I'm sure it was all hands on deck with that going on. Like, what were some of the unique challenges or fun things you had to tackle during that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a couple, kind of short bursts of growth like that, and then the last couple months has been more sustained. During those short bursts, early on, a lot of the pain points were really more around like scaling infrastructure and stuff like that. Thankfully, I guess it was a little over a year ago, we moved everything to on-prem servers. So most of our stuff is running on racks that we install and control. Only a few things are still on AWS, and we use Cloudflare for a few things too, as like for image storage, for instance, that kind of thing. So things are scattered around. There's redundancy in there too as well. But that helped, I think, a lot with scaling. It also introduced its own issues too, of just like, I know folks have to, be familiar with these like on-prem solutions and things that are like maybe a little more custom sometimes in order to scale that kind of stuff. But again, we have like a world-class team of infrastructure and backend devs, and they're just incredible. So I'll say during those like initial spikes, and even in these later spikes, a lot of the times it's not me that has to like bear the brunt of some of these things. Thankfully, I mean, I'm a front-end developer primarily. Or really, I should say I'm just like an application, like feature developer. I do some back end as well, but nothing necessarily that's going to be like critical path when, we're seeing follow spikes of, I don't know how many hundreds per second or whatever, that kind of thing. But during like the latest growth wave, we had I could say like some challenges I actually did have, or still am having, is like exactly that prioritization shift that happens all the time. Um, prior to our big growth wave in like November, we had a handful of things that were underway, and I'd spent some time working on them, and we just had to sort of just shelve those things and work on other aspects, things like moderation, and just general quality of life things, because we start to see a huge wave of users come in, and so we get a lot more reports of like pain points with sign up and stuff like that, and that is very important. Obviously, we need to help people get into the app and get signed up and onboarded and find their clusters of people, as Josh mentioned. And so that's been like an interesting thing where it's just kind of all hands on deck. Like, what can we do to, we have 20 million new users. What can we do to like keep those users as much as possible? What can we do to like make their experience really good? And some of those things, like longer running projects that were a priority 6 months ago, just aren't a priority anymore, that kind of thing. And that's just how startups go too, so it's not really like it's not a complaint. It's a good thing that things are shifting all the time. But it does make it kind of interesting, like, day to day, week to week, to know, you jump back in on Monday and you're like, okay, what are we facing today? What do we need to do by Sunday, to ship the next app release? And thankfully those are things that are, usually within our grasp. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
You did mention when I was asking about React Native and rolling your own, SSR framework. It's something that I think everyone kind of has a rite of passage of doing, and it's super fun. But it made me think about, I feel like you were sharing your own sort of framework that you were working on probably like a year ago. Could you remind me what that was? Was it like Dino, or is it something like a JavaScript related?
Yeah, that's funny. You have no idea how long I've waited for someone to ask me that on a podcast.
This is your
probably
moment.
For good reason. Probably for good reason. It's been languishing for a long time, but no, it was called Presta, like a bike inner tube valve. That's where I got
okay.
that. Yeah, and it was a very stripped back, kind of minimal approach to building like web apps and stuff like that. It was essentially just a thin wrapper around serverless functions or Cloudflare workers. And I still actually use it for a few small things. I still have friends that use it on some small production things. Like I know recently a friend made like a sitemap with it, because it's just a very easy like little framework to spin up like an XML route, that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I spent a lot of time on that. I was really interested in trying to like build frameworks and like understand the ins and outs of different platforms. That was kind of the main goal behind it. Really was just to understand serverless platforms and their differences and drawbacks and things like that. So it was a good experience. I learned a lot of stuff, built a lot of kind of like wacky things with it that I wouldn't have had a chance to work on otherwise. But in the end, it's kind of it's a futile exercise in the face of like massive very talented teams like at Vercel and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't regret it. I know, everyone has their little framework that they work on. I know Josh has his own as well, Flare React, maybe more than that. But I definitely tuned into that when that came out as well, because I was interested in that for exactly the same reasons. Just like a nice, light, little, thin framework, built by an indie dev. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to shout you out. I was like, that was some cool stuff. I missed that like era of like small frameworks and things. Like, you guys remember Chew.js? Chew.js?
No,
Great.
I don't.
Joshua Whites. Yeah, that guy was, anyway, super cool stuff. But anyway, yeah, shout out Josh. I don't know if you have any thoughts on your endeavors there.
No, I agree. It's so fun. Like it's so fun going all in on something like, and having it consume you like day and night, thinking about the project and building it and releasing it out there. And it's like a dopamine hit to just build something like that. I think it's so funny, and you may experience this too, that like the thing you built so long ago it's not in your mind anymore. You're like, oh, that was fun, like past tense. There's still people like using that, right? I don't know if you still have like people come in into the issues. Or like, I'm just starting this project. I'd like to check it out. I'm like, this is so long ago, and like if I were you, I would use something way different. Like,
Yeah.
please don't use this for work. And so it's so funny seeing like even the things that we build that we think are just toy projects, people find useful, and I think that's kind of a fun takeaway from open source for sure.
It is, yeah. It is delightful, yeah, but a little scary. Yeah, you're right.
It
You
is,
come in, you're
yeah.
like, well, it's
I'm
very
definitely
kind of
not
you, but
maintaining this.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, straight up, I have no idea. Oh, is the file watchers having a bug? Oh, I don't. Sorry, that's all you.
Good
Like,
luck.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation. At the end of our podcasts, we typically do a one cool thing or a shout out or some.
Hmm.
It's either like a TV show or movie or band or some open source project or something. And
Hmm.
so I won't put you on the spot, Eric, but if you do have one, you can go last. I will start.
Okay.
I'll share my thing. The thing that has been really giving me a lot of joy is the TV show called Night Agent on Netflix. And it's surprising. It kind of looks corny. It's like your typical CIA spy type of show, but it is so well paced and written, and like it does not have a single boring moment where you're like, gosh, this conversation has been dragging on for 5 minutes, or some. It doesn't go to the backstory of the kid, and that's a whole episode throwback of that. Like, it doesn't follow those tropes of TV shows. And so if you're looking for like a fun show to watch, a thriller type of show, I'd recommend Night Agent on Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the second or third recommendation I've gotten for that, Josh. So I think I'm gonna have to check it out.
Austin,
Now that
I would
I got it
say
from a trusted source.
you bear striking resemblance to the lead character. I don't know if they've told you that, but I just realized that now. So
Oh, great! No, I have to look him
yeah,
up. I
yeah.
guarantee he has more hair than I do.
I don't know. His hair is quite short. So, and he's got a beard in the second season, at least the first episode. So
Well,
two seasons.
I'll watch it with my wife, and I'll let you know
Yeah.
if she agrees.
Awesome.
That's a good one, Josh. For me, I'm nothing if not an Apple TV shill at this point. I feel like I pick Apple TV something every week, but now that it's starting to get released, I have to return to it. Severance season 2 is coming out. It's probably my favorite TV show of all time. I think I'm ready to just say that. I
You're
think I've
calling
come
it?
to that point.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
But Severance, it's still getting released. So if you're one of those that doesn't like to wait week to week to get the next episodes, you need to wait a few more weeks. But 4 episodes in, I'm loving it. Hop on now while you can, because it's TV magic. And that's all I need to say about Severance season 2.
Yeah, I've been watching as well. I'm actually rewatching the first season with my wife. It's her first watch through, so
Yep,
which
good
is
move.
helpful because it was quite a while ago, the first season. Eric, did you think of anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, also, I'm also watching Severance season 2.
Yep.
Thankfully, we watched Severance season 1 like a couple weeks ago for the first
Yeah,
time, so
that's the
So
way.
it's
it's
fresh.
nice. It's very fresh in my mind. We tend to do that with shows. We wait until like other seasons come out, not on purpose,
Smart.
but just how it shakes out. Um, yeah, I mean, like in the vein of like things I'm listening to, I recently rediscovered a band called Toe. They're like kind of a Japanese alt, kind of jazzy, kind of like post metal rock band kind of thing. I don't know how to describe them, but I'm really enjoying that. That's getting me through these kind of like kind of gloomy months in Chicago. Not that it's like super upbeat or anything, but it just sort of fits with the vibe, and it kind of helps me focus and stuff. And also, I want to just shout out Character Limit, the book by Kate Conger and Ryan Mack, a couple Bluesky users. It's about the takeover of Twitter by Elon Musk, and it's very informative, very interesting. Highly recommend giving it a listen. I'm just listening to it on an audiobook, so it's a good thing to listen to in the car, on a walk, or that kind of thing. So definitely
Awesome.
very interesting and motivating and applicable to Bluesky. So
Yeah, very much. And I like the name of it too, Character Limit.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's a good name.
On point.
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. Well, thanks so much. I think we had a successful first guest episode of Josh and Austin Figure It Out. This was fun.
Awesome.
Learned about React Native, learned about Bluesky, learned about Iowa, Chicago, New York City, all the things.
Love it. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was great. Really, really great to talk
Thanks,
to you
Eric.
both and meet you both finally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for coming on. All right. Well, we'll talk to you later and see you around.
All righty.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
it easy, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.